All right, so hi everybody. We are going to start in just about another minute or two. We'll just give everyone a little bit of time to join the webinar. Probably start around 12:01 and we'll be back. All right. Hi, everybody. I think we are ready to start. Welcome to our first Ask an EV Owner webinar. We're really happy that you could come and join us for this during these uncertain times. So just a couple housekeeping things. As an attendee, you are muted. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the questions box and we will get to them at different points in the presentation. So just a quick rundown of how this is going to go. I'm going to introduce myself and the EV owners, and then we will move on to questions and have plenty of time for that. So without further ado, so my name is Devin DeLibero. I am the Energy Program Coordinator with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and my main focus is on the Drive Green program. So Drive Green is a program that's been around for about 4 years now with Green Energy Consumers, and it's a way for us to educate people about electric vehicles and answer any and all questions they could possibly want to know. And that's why we do things like these webinars and also events when conditions allow. And then we also have our discount portal. So basically what that is you sign up for a test drive and you can get a discount at one of our participating dealers. And so you'll be hearing from a bunch of people today, and most of them have gone through this program and purchased or leased their own vehicle through this program and received that discount. So Green Energy Consumers overall is a renewable energy nonprofit based in both Providence and Boston. Our mission is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. And we do this in a myriad of ways with a bunch of different programs, but today we were here to focus more on the Drive Green program and electric vehicles. So that is one way we harness the power. So without further ado, I will let our first owner introduce themselves. So Peter, you are up.
Hi, my name is Peter Viner Brown, as you can see, and I currently have a Nissan Leaf 2018, which I'm leasing through the program with Green Energy. I got it 2 years ago. Before that, I had a used Ford Focus Electric, which I owned for 3 years. I got it off lease. So I guess I'm a committed electric vehicle owner. And as you can see from the photograph, I'm retired now, but I'm a volunteer with a Providence village in Providence and give rides to older people. Or we used to give rides to older people. Now we get their groceries for them. And so I tend to use the Leaf to do my volunteer work. other things. I don't drive it a huge amount. It looks like I'm probably going to will turn out to drive about 10,000 miles a year. But my son and his partner have been up from New York for 2 months, and they hijacked my car and put about 2,500 miles on it. So I'm thoroughly enjoyed driving it as well, I have to say.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks so much, Peter. And so the next EV owner you'll be introduced to is Ivy Washington. And Ivy, go ahead when you're ready.
Hi everyone, this is Ivy. I hope you're all doing well today. You're seeing me there with my BMW i3 Rex that I started leasing in 2018, December of 2018. And I love it. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I didn't go through the Drive Green program exactly. I used what was on the website from Drive Green to negotiate with a dealership that was nearby. So just another idea, if there are dealerships that are on there that aren't near where you live, you can also bring that and say, hey, I'm going to go to this other dealership. Can you match this deal? I love to drive. So if there's anyone on the call who wants to hear just about the fun of driving, I did a lot of test driving and can talk about that too. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ivy. Okay. So now we have John, and John will introduce himself. Go ahead, John.
Hi, I'm John. I'm 58 years old and I live in Quincy, Massachusetts. I'm the IT director for a nonprofit biotech research company in Mattapan and in Fall River. And I leased my first all-electric vehicle, which is the Chevy Bolt EV Premier, in March of 2017. My wife and I liked it so much that we traded in her 2005 Honda Element for a Bolt EV in 2019. And when the lease was up for my 2017 Bolt, we purchased another one in January of 2020. So we're currently a 2 Bolt EV family with a 2019 and a 2020. That picture of me that's me standing in front of the 2020. And Green Energy Consumers Alliance helped me purchase all 3 Bolts by pre-negotiating the cost with our local Chevy dealership, which was great. And so I hope these seminars are helpful for people who are considering EV ownership. I look forward to answering any questions.
Perfect. Thanks, John. Okay. And so next, we will move on to Glen. All right, you're all set, Glen.
Okay. Hi, this is a picture of me out in New Mexico with my dog, and we bought our Kia Niro a year ago from a dealer in Braintree, Quirk Kia. There was no one, we live in Greenfield, Mass. There was no one locally selling this particular brand car. We did test drive a Hyundai Kona, and we liked the Niro because it was a little bit bigger, and we essentially got a car so that we could travel long distances in it. We like to do a lot of camping excursions and paddling in remote areas, and we wanted a range, and this car has up to about a 300-mile range on a full charge, which was really critical for some of the places that we go to. And we recently returned from an over 8,800 mile trip from Massachusetts to Southern California, a 60-day trip, which we camped entirely across the country and back in February, and returned in March. So it's been, we love this vehicle. It's our first electric vehicle. We upgraded from a Prius C, and with 2 adults and 2 dogs and all of our camping gear, it was just the right size car for us, and we've loved everything about it now. So we've had it for a year.
All right. Thanks so much. All right, so now that you have heard from everybody, we're just going to kick off with a couple different questions and give people some time to ask their own questions. So just for the panelists, you can feel free to jump in whenever you are comfortable if there's a question you particularly want to answer. So the first one is, what's the most common EV myth you hear, and how do you combat it?
I think there are many, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think there are so many myths out there, and there's a lot of misinformation about electric vehicles. But I'm not sure about the most common one, but I think the one that people seem to be concerned about is the battery. And, you know, is it going to just die on you, or, you know, what happens over the years to the battery? And electric cars have been around for quite a long time, but the ones that have become most common in the world are the Nissan Leafs. They started in 2010, and there are some Nissan Leafs now that are 10 years old, and the batteries have endured. And actually, in a Nissan Leaf, they can be replaced. And I watched a site online that I follow in the UK, and the person had owned a Nissan Leaf from 2010. He still had it. His battery would do 80 miles. It had an 80-mile range, which wasn't unusual in 2010. That sounds low now, but then it was quite good for electric cars. And now the car will do 65 miles, and he still has it. Because it's just been incredibly reliable for him, and he still uses it for short trips. So the thought that EV batteries die, they don't die like car batteries, like the lead acid batteries that you have in gasoline vehicles. They just very slowly lose their range. And Nissan and probably some of the other manufacturers are quite willing to replace them. And the person who owns this car is actually going to get it replaced once the lockdown has finished, and then he'll have 140 miles range. And he said the only expense he's had in 10 years is a set of tires and windshield wash. Nothing else has gone wrong with this car.
Oh, thanks, Peter. I think we watch all the same things because I definitely saw that video too.
Did you?
I did, yes. Okay, I think this one would be a good question for Ivy. Can you explain one pedal driving and how fun it is?
Sure. My BMW i3, I test drove it a bunch of times before I committed because it does feel a little bit different than your average car. When you take your foot off the gas, it starts slowing down immediately. And so it does take a little bit of getting used to, but now it's second nature to me. And that's saying something. The car that I had before this was a Toyota Camry that idled really fast. If you weren't on the gas, you were still moving forward, and you were moving forward at a good clip unless you put your foot on the brake. So it is very different, but it's super easy to get used to. It also means that since it's braking, even when you're not touching the brake, you're recharging the battery. So it's just making it easier for you to go longer on the same charge. And like I said, it's pretty easy to get used to. I remember initially I was nervous that since I would be slowing down without touching the brake, would there be an issue with drivers behind me, not knowing that I was slowing down. But now, having driven for well over a year, more like a year and a half, never been a problem. Then if you're in a situation, I'm doing a lot of city driving where you want to make sure people behind you know, you can always tap on the brakes so that they see the brake lights and all of that kind of thing. Is there a benefit that I missed there, Devin?
Oh, I think that was a perfect explanation. That was really great.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go.
To the one pedal drive, and this is John again. I have the Chevy Bolt. I'm not sure about the BMW. With the Bolt, you can choose to do one pedal driving, or you can put it in drive and drive like a regular car. Now, my wife puts it in D, and she drives like a regular car and uses her brakes to stop. It does do a little bit of regen in drive, but I drive exclusively it's L on, I don't know why it stands for L, it's not low, but L on the Bolt. That's one pedal driving, and I drive from my house in Quincy to work in Mattapan, and I never touch the brake to stop the car. It's just to hold it in place when I'm actually stopped at a hill until Hilltop Assist comes on, and then you don't need the brake at all. And also just to mention, the as you slow down with one pedal driving, the brake lights do go on. There's a sensor. It's only when you're completely stopped at a red light and you have your foot off of the pedal that the light would be off. So I put my foot on the brake and then the brake light goes on. So I'm holding myself in place. So you can drive one pedal driving, or you can drive like a regular car, and you can choose when you want to do that and what the best situation is, your driving situation is in a one pedal.
Great.
Can I
Okay.
jump in and talk
Everybody
about?
can jump in whenever they like. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was wanted to talk about what they call the E pedal in the Leaf, and it is one pedal driving, and the brake lights do come on when you lift off on the throttle. Can't call it the gas pedal anymore because there's no gas involved. But when you lift off on the throttle and the deceleration is a certain rate, the brake lights do come on. That didn't happen with the Focus, so I did notice people getting a bit close at times. The other thing with the E-pedal is it locks when you take your foot right off the gas, even if you're on a hill. The friction brakes jump in and hold you still. So the E-pedal on the Nissan will bring you to a complete stop without using the brake pedal, and it will hold you there. And it's something that I've really gotten used to, and I think now I wouldn't be interested in getting a car that didn't have that feature, because it's really very relaxed, especially in traffic. When you're in traffic, you don't have to keep swapping over from the brake, from the throttle to the brake pedal, and it's just so much more relaxed way of driving.
This is John again. It also saves on your brake pads because you're not using them to stop the car as frequently. I have a friend who has a Volt, and he's got over 200,000 miles on it, and he's never replaced the brake pads because of this.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Let's see. So the next question, and feel free to answer whoever wants to go first, is how do you find public charging stations? So I'm referring more to like apps and things like that.
Yeah, this is Glenn. I'll just say that on our cross-country trip, we used literally dozens of different charging stations, especially fast chargers. And we used the app called PlugShare, and we never had a situation where we were below 30 miles of range where we were looking for a charging station. We were always pretty much anticipating, I think the same way you would be looking for a gas station, we were anticipating where we would go charge to, and we always tried to arrive at that location with amount of battery capacity well in excess, so that we never got to the point where we were running low. But I think one of the problems right now with charging is that there's no uniform network of charging stations. There are a half dozen or more different brands, like there are brands of gas stations. And it would be nice if they were somehow more uniform. But I think that's the way our free market enterprise system has developed. But we never had a problem finding charging stations, both level 2 charging stations and also fast chargers. It just was never an issue for us.
Okay. All
Just
right.
can I add to that? I just wanted to say that PlugShare is a really good app because it has just about everything on it. But there's now Electrify America, which is what Volkswagen's putting in. There's EVgo, which is the ones that do the rapid charge. And for Nissan Leaf owners, you get 2 years of free charging, rapid charging with EVgo when you lease or buy a Nissan. But as the previous speaker just said, there's no uniform way of using these stations. You have to have a little card or an app on your phone. So if you really want to drive long distances, the very best electric vehicle to buy at the moment is the Tesla, or any form of Tesla, because they have their own charging stations all over the country, and you don't have to mess around with getting a card out and scanning it under the charging station. You just plug in, and I think this is the way that charging has to go. People don't want to mess around. So if you're a Tesla owner, you just drive up to one of their superchargers and plug the car in, and that's it. That's all you do, which I think is the way things have to go.
And
Yeah,
this is Glen
definitely.
again. I'll jump in quickly and say that in Greenfield, Mass, here we have public charging locations within walking distance of 5 to 10 minute walk from where we live, and we often drive our car there, plug it in. So far, since we got our car, the charging is free. There's no charge for the electricity. So I do have a home charger available, which we actually have never plugged the car into except to make sure it worked. But otherwise, we drive to one of the locations nearby, leave our car there either during the day or even overnight. One of them is at the local county jail, which we feel is the safest place in Greenfield to leave a parked car. And that parking lot is entirely covered with solar panels. So there's a connection there between the solar energy and charging your car. And as well, the city of Greenfield is a 100% renewable, zero carbon energy system. So no matter where you plug your car in, as long as you're participating in that, and the city certainly participates in that, there's zero carbon emissions from the electricity itself. So it's a great system that's available, at least in Greenfields.
Great.
Also,
Okay.
this is John. A little known hint about Google is that you can use Google Assistant while you're driving and ask it to navigate to the nearest electric vehicle charging station, and it will pull up maps and navigate you there, give you turn-by-turn directions. So you can do it on the fly if you want.
Okay. All right, so here's our last question. And Glenn, I feel like you're an expert in this one. Can EVs be used for long distance driving?
Well, I already spoke about that, so I'll let someone else who has some other experience other than mine. But my answer is absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's why we got the car that we got.
I think to do long distance driving, depending on the vehicle you have, you just have to plan it out and make sure that, in fact, you can, I think, with some apps to plan to go from one charger to the next one. I've been in conversations with people. I remember being at a farmer's market in Rhode Island, and I was in conversation. I had my car there showing an electric vehicle for green energy, and an older lady came up and said, well, I'm not going to buy an electric vehicle until they can do 300 miles. So I said, well, do you actually drive 300 miles without stopping? And she said, yes. And I'm thinking, wow, that is a long way to go without stopping. And I couldn't do that. I mean, she must, I don't know how she could do that, but driving 300 miles without stopping takes numbers of hours. So I think people think that you need this huge range on electric vehicles. But if you think of it in terms of practicality, how far are you going to drive without a brake? So if you drive a couple of 100 miles and take a half-hour break, you can recharge on a rapid charger pretty much to up to 100%. So I think people go on about range, but in practical terms, a car with 200 to 300 miles range, you could travel all over the country, no problem at all.
I agree. This is John speaking. I agree. And actually, over the last 3 years since I've owned an EV, there are more and more charging stations along the route. that being said, I can drive the Bolt, and I have driven my Bolt from Boston to Brooklyn on a single charge, and then plugged in there and drove home. But now there's a ton of fast chargers on the way on the route from Boston to New York City, and so that it's becoming less and less of an issue. Before, you did have to do some homework and figure out your route, but now and figure out your stops. But now it's not as difficult as you may think. I think people who don't have EVs just don't notice the charging stations that are there. It's not until you open that Plug Share app, or there's another one, a Better Route Planner, that you can open up and you can see how many charging stations are out there. There's a lot. So long distance driving may have been tougher maybe in 2016, but now it's not that hard.
All right.
Yeah, this is Glenn. I'll just add one thing for us, for our use. We wanted to be able to get to very remote areas, because we do a lot of backpacking and camping and hiking and also paddling. And so those locations don't have opportunities to charge. So we wanted to be able to get 100 miles away from the nearest charger without worrying about running out of electricity. And the one thing that we were able to do on our cross-country trip was we brought our level 2 charger with us, which has a adapter plug, so that we could plug it into the campgrounds that we stayed at while we were traveling, just like people plug in their RVs. And that made a huge difference for us to be able to go to more remote locations from having a full battery charge, leaving a campground, and then heading out essentially into the wilderness, which is where we'd like to end up. So that option of charging that's not a public EV charging station, but there are other ways to charge your EV besides the existing network. And we found that the campgrounds where we were staying anyway while we were traveling was the perfect way to charge our car overnight.
Okay, so that's actually a good transition, because I did want to mention Glenn has actually written a blog post for us. So if you head on over to greenenergyconsumers.org/blog, you'll be able to read all about Glenn's trip and see how it actually is, how much you are actually able to travel, and how far and how easy it is, or how many difficulties you might have ran into. So I'm going to transition now again to some more audience questions. And one for you, Ivy, was about your the REX part of your car, which means a range extender for those who aren't familiar with the term. So if you could just tell people how often you use it, or are you really relying more on the electricity, or how does that all work for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about that as people were answering the question about long distance driving. I think as a first time EV owner, I was a little bit nervous about the range and the sort of being dependent on charging stations. And so that was part of why I picked the i3 Rex. BMW makes an i3 that doesn't have a Rex. And what it is it's basically a little engine in the car. They say it's kind of the size of a motorcycle engine that does take gas, and the gas tank only holds about 2 gallons. And what it does is it recharges the battery if the battery gets very low. So it doesn't actually power the car. It's not a hybrid, but it does give you that little bit of peace of mind if you're sort of nervous and you're saying, okay, I don't know where the next charging station is, but I know where I could get to a gas station, and you can always put in a couple of gallons to get you a little bit further. The downside is because that engine is in the car, that's very heavy, which means that it reduces the actual electric range. So it's a little bit of a balancing act of like how far, getting back to what some of the other panelists were saying, how far do you need to go? What is the range that you need? My experience since I've gotten it has been that I've used it very few times. My experience, like everyone else, has been that almost always when I need a charging station, I can find one. The times that I do use it are when I'm driving, I live in Cambridge in eastern part of Massachusetts, and when I'm going to visit a friend who's in upstate New York, often I will, make sure my car is charged before I leave, then take a stop at the last chance on the Pike to do the rapid charging, charge it again, and then usually before I get to her house, the range extender will kick in for a little bit. And then just when I get to her house, I plug in at her house. I was glad Glenn brought up the other charging options, because I think that's another myth that comes up a lot, that people think that you have to have some sort of fancy charger and don't know that many of these cars you can just plug into a 3-prong outlet. And that there are often ways that you can charge. They take much longer, but that you don't actually have to have sort of like this specific charging station in order to charge the car.
Awesome. All right, I think that was really comprehensive. Okay. So yeah, it's just good to know for folks that you don't have to have a pure electric vehicle if you're not ready for it. There are other options where you can have a gas backup if that makes you more comfortable. Okay, so another question from the audience is, what is the best way to help get more EV chargers in Massachusetts and the United States in general, besides buying an EV, which this person has already done?
Well, I wanted to make a point. People think that the charging points are chargers. Actually, they're not. The chargers are in the car. So it's just an intelligent electric supply. Each car has a charger in it, and hence you can connect it just about any outlet. So they probably will always be called chargers, but actually they're not. They are. The chargers are actually a part of the vehicle. And in the early days of EVs, you had to be careful to make sure the capacity of your charger was such that it didn't take a long time to charge. The e-Golfs, the less expensive e-Golf, had quite a small charger in it, and it took a long time, even with a level 240 volt or to charge up. So I guess the question was, how can you encourage people to put more chargers? I guess I think it will be driven by usage. In the UK, a company put a whole bunch of chargers in a few years ago, and they found they weren't being used because there wasn't the adoption of electric vehicles. But I think if there are electric vehicles out there, places like restaurants and even gas stations now will put in charge points, because it means for electric vehicles they take probably at least half an hour to charge. What are people going to do? They're going to get a cup of coffee, something to eat. So it's a source of income for them. So I think as the numbers of electric vehicles increase, you will start seeing a lot more charge points.
Can I add something too? This is John. I also I would recommend that you get involved with your city or town and sort of force the hand and explain, the advantages of electric vehicles and the advantages of, what they say, if you build it, they will come. If you put electric vehicle charging stations in your town, then people will come there and they'll spend money, and they'll go to the restaurant or they'll go to the museum or do historic tours. In Quincy, when I first bought my first EV, there was one charging station, and it was at Granite City Electric, and it was so that people who were going in to look at lamps and things like that could plug in their car and charge, and that was it. In Quincy now, with the new parking garage that they just built in Quincy, there are 10 level 2 charging stations in there with the capacity to add 75 more. So they're really being forward thinking in Quincy, and I have to take credit. I did push them on that to say that we really should have that there. If you want these restaurants to succeed, in Quincy Center, you should put in charging stations. And it's really taken off in Quincy. We're now on the map for quite a few charging stations. Don't have what people call a level 3, the fast charging station in Quincy yet, but for people visiting and using the stores and shopping centers and things like that, there are options now. So get involved with your city or town.
That actually is a great response, because that's something similar to what I was going to say, which is to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening around you locally, and be like aware of different policies that are being introduced, and really just contact your representatives. Another point I just wanted to make quickly is that there are make-ready investments from utilities, and these investments encourage charging stations to be put into place in workplaces and multi-unit dwellings. So there is some kind of money being put towards those things. So as long as you are aware of certain things that are happening within your community, and really like pushing for these charging installations to be done, I think that things will move forward rather quickly. Okay, our next question. Is phantom drain an issue for any of you when the car is parked and not plugged in?
I can answer that, John. I did help host an EV show at the South Shore Plaza over was last year, around from Christmas to the end of March. We hadn't plugged in the Bolt at all, and we lost 8 miles of range on the meter. That's it. So no, it's not really that much of an issue. Especially the car was inside of a mall, so it's ideal weather conditions. But no, it's not really that much of an issue. At least with the Chevy Bolt, we don't have a problem. People do ask that question a lot, but generally no. But generally, if you're at home, plug it in.
We've actually done a lot of research on batteries. So if you check out our website, we can learn all about that sort of thing. And we've done some battery webinars, which I think we might have one coming up. So check out our website if you're interested more in batteries and potentially attending that webinar. What I will say that I've learned from my colleague is that it is good to keep your battery between 20 and 80%, and you don't want to charge it all the way to 100% most of the time, because that is how the battery degrades quicker. So that's just something I'll add quickly. Okay, I think this question is for Glen, or anybody who has experience. When plugged in at a campground, did the adapter allow for 110 watt, which gave a slower overnight trickle?
Well, so I think the watts and volts often get confused, but most campgrounds, actually we stayed at 22 different campgrounds on our trip, and only one of those campgrounds did not have a 50 amp service. And that's what my level 2 charger that I brought with me, not the one that came with the car, but it was an inexpensive one that I purchased. It comes with adapter cables or dog bones, so that you could essentially plug it into any of the common 220 volt plugs that are out in the world. And they're very uniform at campgrounds. There's a certain type that RVs plug into. And so we always plugged into, except in one case, into the 50 amp service, which got us a full charge overnight. While we were sleeping, the car was fully charged in the morning. And that to me was really awesome, because it cost, we were going to camp anyway, and it cost $14 at most of the campgrounds, and we got a full charge overnight included in our camping fee, because that's the price that you pay if you would pull in with an RV. So it really was great, but you want to make sure that you have the right adapter to plug your charger into it. There was only one time where we plugged into a wall outlet, essentially the 120 volt plug at a campground, and our charger also has an adapter that allows us to plug into that. And then it did take much longer to charge, about 3 times longer. but we happened to be at that campground for 3 days, and by the time we left, we had a full charge. So, and we took day trips during the day and then came back and plugged in overnight. So it really worked out perfectly for us. But you know, that would be a concern, that you'd want to make sure you had the right adapters to plug into with your level 2 charger.
All right. Before we move on to more questions, I just want to acknowledge that we have had a bunch of comments from other EV owners, and I really appreciate you all attending and your comments. They're very interesting. I would like to say that if you are interested in being a panelist on the next series of these webinars, feel free to send me an email after this, and we'd be more than happy to have you. But with that being said, I'll jump into the next question. So the next one is, how much on average did your electricity bill increase in a month after you got the electric car?
This is Glenn. I'll say 0. We just don't ever
elsewhere,
charge.
right?
We don't ever charge at home. We have PV panels on our roof, and we run mini splits to heat our house, but we've never had to plug in the car to the system that I ran an outlet to the outside of the house. We've never had to plug into it.
This is John speaking. It's somewhere between $8 and $10 a week for me per car. So we have 2, so double that now. But it was consistent, and I have a vehicle charging station at home that accommodates 2 cars to charge at the same time. Only you get half the amps. So normally the Bolt draws 32 amps. If you plug 2 of them in, you get 16 amps each. And then when one of them is fully charged, the other one gets the full 32 amps. So yeah, about $8 to $10 a week for me. And that's driving about 220 miles a week.
Which is still considerably less than you would pay at the pump, I'm assuming.
Way less, way less. The Honda Element was about $30 a week.
Oh, wow.
Could I jump in?
Yes, of course, Peter.
I have a charge point level 2 charger that I installed, and they're more expensive than other chargers, but they do give you all the stats that you can look at on an app on your phone. Just looking at May, it cost supposedly $42. Now, they estimate the National Grid cost, but there's a program that is available, I don't know whether it still is available through Green Energy, whereby if you charge overnight, you get a discount from National Grid. So working that out with the discount, I discovered with the Leaf, it costs about 3 cents a mile to run it. So it depends on how many miles you drive in a month. But with the overnight discount, I always charge overnight. It is almost exactly 3 cents a mile.
Right. Okay. So I just quickly want to point out that while I did advertise that program to Peter, Green Energy Consumers is not part of that particular discount program. That is solely run by National Grid. And I believe that it's closed to new members because they've gotten as many people as they've wanted. And there actually have some concerns about it with people not charging and driving so much. So, but Ivy, we haven't heard from you. So do you often charge from home? Has your electricity bill gone up significantly, or do you charge elsewhere?
I do charge at home. It has not gone up significantly at all. I also, though, don't have a very long commute, but I would say if you averaged it out, it's between $5 and $10 a month, not a week for me.
Wow.
So it's very low.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So we'll move on to the next question. The next question is about batteries again. It says, do you foresee these batteries being replaceable in the future, which I think Peter touched upon a little bit earlier. So go ahead. Yes,
they are replaceable. Certainly with the Leaf, they are replaceable. I had a bad experience with the Ford Focus, which had about 13,000 miles on it when I got it. It had a battery that was cooled, liquid cooled, which is very common. And unfortunately, there was a leak into the battery, and it destroyed the battery. But the Ford Focus was what they call a compliance car. Ford really didn't want to make electric vehicles, and they only did it because in California they're pretty much required to. So they converted the gasoline car to battery power. They did a pretty good job, but their service just wasn't there. So it took 6 weeks to get the battery replaced. The batteries cost a lot of money. For the Nissan Leaf, they do have a program. You can replace the Leaf battery for somewhere around $8,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but they last a good 10 years. And then, as the story I was telling before of the guy who's had his Leaf for 10 years and started out with a battery that would only do 80 miles, he's going to get it replaced with the new Leaf battery, which will do 150 miles. So you know, you're buying a new car basically for the cost of replacing the batteries. Batteries on the other myth is that these batteries, which contain rare earth elements like cobalt and all this other stuff, are just thrown away. They're not. They are recycled in various different ways. And the first part of the recycling of car EV batteries is that they take them and use them for static storage, like the Tesla Powerwall. And also they're used or planned to be used in charging stations on highways. The thought being that if you have a battery, bank of batteries at these charging stations, you can accommodate a lot of quick charging with numerous vehicles that you wouldn't be able to with just a pure grid connection. You wouldn't be able to draw the power from the grid as quickly as the cars could charge. So they put a bank of batteries in, so the cars charge from the batteries and then get slowly recharged from the grid. And EV batteries are ideal for that purpose of putting them in the bank for use with recharging.
There's, if you're into tech, there is a video on YouTube from Weber College, W-E-B-E-R College, showing taking the battery out of the Bolt and then putting it back in. And it's actually pretty simple. It's an interesting video to watch. That being said, because I got an early Bolt, the 2017 Bolt, which was manufactured in October of 2016, they had an issue with the battery. With some people, one of the batteries are made up of different segments, different cells. And so if one cell goes wrong or goes bad, you could just replace that one cell. But originally, Chevy just replaced the entire battery and gave you a brand new battery. And they had a recall for cars manufactured in October of 2016. Lucky me, my car was built then. And so I got a recall message, but I never had a problem with the Bolt. But they replaced the battery in 2017, the entire battery, and it took a day. I dropped it off in the morning and picked it up that night, and I had a brand new battery in it. They ordered it ahead of time and all that type of stuff. But so I had a 2018 battery in my 2017 Bolt.
Yeah, the other thing about.
Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say the other thing about batteries, they are
you're breaking up.
Warranted for 8 years typically and 100,000 miles. So this talk about battery failures, it doesn't actually cost you anything to get them replaced.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So I guess, sorry, I think, Peter, I couldn't hear you, but I think other people could hear you fine. So, and I think you made my point that I was going to make. So I think we're ready to move on. So I have one final question before we wrap up. And then I think we can go. But before I get to that, I just want to say if you are interested in batteries and things like that, so we have a pre-recorded webinar that is on our charging page if you want to learn more and do a deeper dive into batteries. So that's there if you need it. But our final question is, knowing what you know now, if you were to buy a new EV, what would you buy? The same one you have now, a Tesla, something coming out soon? What would you think you would do?
This is Glen.
Everybody.
Yeah, this is Glenn. I'd say that we are so happy with the Niro. It is just such a pleasure to drive, to be in to drive. When we first got our little Prius C, the first thing I noticed about that car was that it stalled out at every red light that you came to. The engine stopped, and I immediately thought, every single car should do this. It should be required by the federal government that every car, the engine stops when you come to a red light. I mean, just that would be a huge public health benefit. But now that I have a fully electric car, I really feel that every vehicle should be an electric vehicle. There is no reason why people shouldn't be driving I mean, at least from my experience from the Kia Niro, it is such an awesome car. There's no reason why anyone should drive anything else. And we did have a recall on the water pump on our vehicle. I took it in. It was supposed to take an hour or two. They broke some screw or something while they were replacing it. And so they had to give me a loaner car. And I hated driving. They gave me a Kia Soul, gas powered, and I hated driving that car. It was so disgusting to drive. I can't explain it. It was weak. It was pathetic to drive. It was nothing like the Kia Niro. And so I will never drive a gas powered car again. And I think once you drive an electric vehicle, you'll never want to drive a gas-powered vehicle again. There's just no comparison in so many different ways.
Perfect. Okay, go ahead.
I would say I think I've read in a couple of places that over 95% of people who have gotten electric cars that they will never drive a gasoline car again. And the main reason is that electric cars are so much easier to live with. You know, you don't have to go out and get gas. You don't have any maintenance worries at all. They don't require any maintenance, and you can charge them at home. It's just a much easier experience living with an electric vehicle. But to answer the question, the car that I have my eye on for the next vehicle when my lease is up next year is the Polestar 2, which is following in the footsteps of Tesla. They're not going to have any dealers. They're going to have what they call, I think, studios around the country where you can go and look at the Polestar 2, and then it gets delivered to you once you've chosen the model you want and the options. And all maintenance is done at home, so you don't have to take it in at all. Currently, I have to take my Leaf in. They want me to bring it in every 5,000 miles. It's a lease, so I'm following the recommendations, and all they do is to rotate the tires. So that's it. So there's no real maintenance on it. I think the pushback from Tesla, they don't want to use existing dealers, and they have their own reasons for that. But the main reason is that electric vehicles don't really need any servicing. So, but yeah, to me, there will be next year, if the whole present circumstance hasn't disrupted the manufacturers too much, there will be a number of new electric vehicles available next year, including the Ford Mach-E Mustang, and I think a slightly crossover based on the Bolt as well. So there are a few in the works. Hopefully they will still be coming online next year. But the one that interests me the most is the Polestar.
Perfect. Yeah, that one is pretty interesting. John, how about you? Are you going to stick with your Bolts?
I guess I like Bolts. I've had 3 of them now. But I am interested in the next the small SUV. I hate the name. They're calling it right now the Bolt EUV, which is going to get confused with the Bolt EV. But it's a slightly bigger SUV style and uses the same battery as the Bolt so far. That's what the news says. I'm interested in that, but I'm also have my eye on Volkswagen ID Buzz, which looks like the old microbus, the Volkswagen Micro, kind of a nod to that vehicle. And I could see that being much more comfortable for an extra long trip. And, you know, I'm 58 years old, I'll be retiring not too long from now. That would be a nice one to do road trips in. So I'm kind of looking at that one as well. But there are a lot of new electric vehicles coming out. The Polestar, I have my eye on that one too. And I really love the looks of the Ford Mach-E, the Mustang Mach-E. That is a really nice looking vehicle. I've seen it at the auto shows too.
So there's tons of options. So Ivy, what are you thinking? Are you going to stay with your i3 or do you have your eye on something else?
It's a good question. I love my i3. I think probably now with more experience, I wouldn't necessarily get the Rex. I think I would probably just get the full EV if I went with the i3 again. But like I said, last time I did a lot of test driving, and I probably will do that again and just see what's new that's out there. But I do love the i3. So it'll be hard to beat that one.
Everyone can keep their eyes open. The possibilities are endless.
I think actually there's an i4 coming from BMW.
Yes.
Yes, and I think they've stopped manufacturing the Rex. They don't offer that anymore.
Yeah, I think the i3 itself might be going away sooner rather than later too. So there'll be more, but there will be more BMW options.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think we've answered all of the questions for folks. This is just for people who aren't, familiar with our website. This is where you can find all of our information. And that's pretty much it. I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists and everyone who participated and asked questions. Know that a recording of this webinar, should you want to listen to it again, will be sent out to you within the coming days. And I think that's it. So thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.